Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Rosie McCool with the Chief Probation Officers of California. I'm very excited for this afternoon's informational workshop that is titled Exploring Programs and Practices that Promote Positive Engagement, Enhance Restorative Justice, and Maintain Accountability. And so very thrilled to be here with all of you today. A few housekeeping items before I introduce our speakers and turn it over to them. If you could please keep yourself on mute unless you are asking a question, and we will take questions in two different ways. You can drop those in the chat, or you can use the raise your hand function, whichever one is your preference. Additionally, we will send out a copy of the PowerPoint after this workshop, so be on the lookout for that. Likely go out on Monday, but want you to be aware that you will receive a copy of the PowerPoint. We always know that that is a valued item from these informational workshops. So with that, I'm very excited to introduce our speakers here with you and to share great information about PBIS and also the ROCA program. So from San Luis Obispo County Probation, we have Marguerite Harris. We also have Lindsay Tompkins, who is with the County Office of Education from San Luis Obispo County. And then we will hear from San Francisco Juvenile Probation. We have Chief Katie Miller and Shane Thomas, both from San Francisco Juvenile Probation. So very excited. Thank you both, all four of you, for making time this afternoon for us. And I will turn it over to Marguerite to get us started.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us on a Friday. It's really nice to see a lot of some names I recognize and in attendance today. So like Rosie said, Marguerite Harris, I'm the current Chief Deputy of the Juvenile Hall here in San Luis Obispo County, at least for another 4 days, when then I'll be retiring. So with me is Lindsay Tompkins. So we have been working I've been working with County Office of Education for the last 8.5 years, bringing PBIS into fruition. And Lindsay continues to be our coach, but I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lindsay Tompkins. My title is Behavior Intervention Services Manager, but really what I do for not only our county office programs, but for local school districts is provide coaching and facilitation for professional development around multi-tiered systems of support. So looking at how do we support youth across our county in multiple different settings. And I'm really excited. I've been with our probation department, working with them for about the last 6 years in this current position. So it's been a joy to learn all things probation, and I continue to learn something every day. So happy to be here today.
So we'd kind of like to know, without everybody introducing themselves, is who is in the audience, kind of the positions that you hold, and then how long have you worked in a facility? So if Amy, if you could go ahead and put those polls up. And Amy, we can go ahead and close the poll. Okay. Good. So I appreciate seeing some management in here, and I'm also recognizing some chiefs and some line staff and supervisors as well, because I think the importance of what we do, and we'll talk about it more, but it's just really nice to see a variety. And then we look at the years of experience. You know, we're getting newer people in our facilities, and obviously working in the facility is a lot of times the foundation of what we do in probation. So a lot of good experience here. So we're going to talk a little bit about us, about our journey, and then some of the implementation stages that we took with our bringing in PBIS into our facility-wide. So we're located in San Luis Obispo. We have the detention. We have our Coastal Valley Academy, which a lot of people do know about, as we do accept youth from other counties. It's our camp program. And then we have our secure track program we call SOAR, which is Seeking Opportunity and Achieving Reentry. We have kids ranging from junior high, and we also have a college program with Rising Scholars. We have Cuesta College just down the road. Positive Behavioral Intervention Supports, nickname is PBIS. So that's what we'll be talking about today, and kind of explaining what it is. And I've gotten a lot of sometimes questions or requests saying, hey, can you send me your program? You know, and PBIS is not a program. It's not a box program that you can just kind of open up and then slap posters on the wall and call it good. It's really a framework. And that framework is going to help your facility get organized and how you see your outcomes that you want to see. And it also will create the culture you want to see. In order to do that, we use data, we use some different practices, and we do use different systems. But I really want to be clear that, and you know, I kind of went in this, doing this 8.5 years ago, of really starting to fly the plane without all the, without it completely built. And so I do know when you look at the totality of what we've done in 8.5 years, people think, oh, it's too heavy of a lift. And it really is being able to have a long-term look and then baby stepping it. So I'll let Lindsay also kind of take over from here and explain a little bit deeper dive into what PBIS is.
Thanks, Marguerite. So PBIS actually came from the medical model. So we in schools see it a lot, but really it originated from looking at that medical model and seeing what actually works. And so kind of to give an analogy of what PBIS is and what it looks like in application is it does look at these kind of three pieces of looking at our data, having these practices, and having our systems that all drive the outcomes that we want. So if we're not seeing the outcomes we want, we go back to those core three things and really look at what are we missing and how do we utilize that. So when we think about PBIS in particular, or multi-tiered systems of support coming from that medical model, we look at it in 3 tiers. And so the first tier is what all get. So when we think about if you get a headache at home and you're just like wondering why you have this headache, kind of universally, we all, most of the time, have access to some type of ibuprofen or Aleve or maybe some migraine medication that we have over the counter. And so that's going to be kind of our tier 1 universal support. It's available to all. You don't need any unique thing to get access to that. And then though, if your headache doesn't go away, maybe it's a couple days, you might go to the doctor. And so that's going to be some supplemental support for you. Hopefully, maybe they'll be able to give you an idea of maybe you need a prescription, or maybe they're going to give you some information about your health. And so that's going to be that additional layer on top of that. You're continuing to take that ibuprofen because your head is driving you crazy. Hopefully it will work. They may give you, again, a pretty basic prescription that other people with more chronic headaches get. They might tell you, here's a higher dose, a prescribed dose of one of those headache medications that you're taking. Hopefully we don't have to get to the point, but where we go to more individualized support, like a neurosurgeon, right? Really figuring out, or a neurologist, really trying to figure out what's happening. We're hoping that with those more universal strategies, those more preventative strategies, we can solve our headache. But again, we don't go straight to the specialist every time we have a migraine, right? We have to get referrals to those people. We don't just immediately go to that. So again, that's where it originated, from that medical model. And so what we do, we're going to talk about some of our key components at that first level, our universal level for youth in the facility. But ultimately, PBIS, as Marguerite said, is not a prescribed package because it is unique to your environment, your facility. So what we do in SLO may not be something that would work in your facility. What we utilize, the basic strategies, are things that you're going to want to utilize in your facility, because that's what research has shown to be effective for our youth and for all humans, really, for the most part. We're just taking it down to that youth level. But again, how you actually do that and what it actually looks like in your facility is going to be very unique. So we talk about PBIS as a coat rack to hang a lot of different evidence-based practices on. It is not something that we're going to tell you exactly what evidence-based practice to do. So for example, we have dialectical behavior therapy steps A curriculum in our classrooms that we provide to our youth. That is the way that we get them skills. But another facility that's implementing PBIS may not have that as an evidence-based practice. They may use something different to teach those skills. So again, it's really a way for you to do all the things you're already doing and just use a way to organize it and really maximize resources as you move through. So in our facility, we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like. It's going to be a pretty brief overview because we really want to focus on what are some of those high leverage things that we found work really well when implementing either a new initiative or, again, for us, it was implementing PBIS. So the main components of PBIS, so this is kind of the main ingredients, and then you put your evidence-based practices or make it look how you want it to look in your facility. But really, we need to have 3 to 5 positively stated expectations. We need to acknowledge when youth are engaging in those expected behaviors. We also want to acknowledge staff when they are engaging in expected behaviors. We want to have a continuum of responses. So when we see somebody not responding to the behavioral expectations, we want to respond to that. We want to do so initially instructionally, but of course, we're going to talk about safety and security and how that plays a part in this kind of PBIS model. And then lastly, if a youth isn't responding to that universal support, how are we getting them more, tier 2 and or tier 3 support? So how are we layering on additional interventions, additional evidence-based practices to support that youth's unique needs? So again, hopefully for most of our youth, these strategies will work, but when it doesn't, how are we going to respond? So here is what PBIS looks like in our facility. So starting on the left-hand side, those are our expectation matrices. And so those tell staff, tell youth, tell volunteers what the expectations are in this specific location under our overarching behavioral expectations, which is to be safe, responsible, and considerate. Marguerite, do you want to speak a little bit to the creation of these and how that started?
Yeah, so literally when we first started implementing our this and had our training, I had basically the staff take the rule book that we had, and we're going to transform it into a handbook. And so everything in our rule book said, no, 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 do not do this, do not do this. And so we changed it to really like, what is it the behavior that you want to see? And so a really good example is no talking, stop talking, and you change that to stay quiet or remain quiet. And you are then stating all the behaviors you want to see rather than saying what you don't want to see. And this is sometimes a slippery slope. And so we just had a staff meeting the other night and we reviewed it. We reviewed some of those phrases that we start to use again, as opposed to going to the positive. And so it is really changing that adult behavior and how we actually present things.
And I think that speaks to that culture shift and culture change that Marguerite spoke to earlier, that PBIS really reframes the way that we typically say things. And we really want to encourage what do we want to see in our facility versus they know what not to do. Our youth are pretty fluent in what not to do. So we really want to shift our language. And as small as that may seem, that is one of the bigger impacts of really thinking about what do we want to see. And it really allows us to not get in those power struggles of, I wasn't doing that. You're telling me to stop, but I wasn't doing that. So again, this seems like kind of maybe a small thing of, okay, why are you just changing your language? But it really has a large impact. And I just pulled a few of our matrices that you see here. We have one for our staff. The youth do not see the staff matrix that's up in our training room, but it is something that our staff are able to see and utilize. It's also upstairs where youth are not at in our facility. Again, we have expectations for the courtroom. We have it for visiting. We have it for units. And anytime we have a new area, location, or routine, we create a matrix and we utilize staff and youth input on what we need to see in that environment. So it's not management saying this is what has to happen. It's like, what are the expectations in this? So for example, we have career and technical education. We didn't have a matrix for that. And so they just whipped one together. Now, does it look as beautiful as these? No, it will soon because we're getting some rebranding done with our matrices, but ultimately it let staff and youth know what are the expectations and how to be safe with construction equipment or how to be safe with culinary equipment, which are scary things to bring into a facility. But we don't want to just have posters on the wall, because posters on the wall don't teach skills. And what our kids are lacking are skills. So in the kind of center up in the top there, you'll see that is how we teach skills. So every day in the classroom, our youth are provided with a direct lesson on something in the facility that either we've seen be an issue or just a routine reminder of what the expectation is. So they actually do this for school credit. It's a part of our expectation that our teachers do this every day, and the teachers enjoy it. They also pull in different skills as well that they see the youth need. The next component of that is when we see the youth following what we want to see them follow, doing those expectations, meeting what we expect of them in all the different locations, is we want to provide them reinforcement for that. So behavioral principles say that you have to provide reinforcement for a skill to continue to develop or to establish a new skill. So we utilize PBIS rewards, which is a digital scanning system, but we also not just give our youth the scan. We want to make sure that we're giving them specific praise around what exactly are they earning that scan for. We actually just talked about this at that staff meeting Marguerite was mentioning earlier this week. We talked about how initially our youth scored really low on one of our data points around that they're frequently recognized for good behavior. Yet our scans we track that. We track how many positive scans youth get. So we call our kind of token economy, our money system, and they were getting plenty. So the fact that they felt like they weren't recognized for behavior was a mismatch. So we went back and we action planned around that. And we actually shared the data with staff that we saw almost a 1 point increase in a 4-point scale. So pretty big in a 4-point scale. We saw an increase in youth feeling like they are recognized for behavior. And so we did a lot of action planning around that. We'll talk a little bit more about how we do that later on. But again, really knowing that we have to be clear and specific about why we're rewarding or reinforcing those behaviors.
And Lindsay, if I could add just a couple things there is, think about us as adults. And when your supervisor tells you, hey, you're doing a good job, and you're like, oh, thank you. And you don't know what it is you're doing well. So there's that component too. So by being very specific about, and this is why we could even use this is why it's adult behavior, because when I work with my staff, it's like, I want to be very specific when I'm praising them and reinforcing what they're doing really well. So that's incredibly important. And then we there's this old philosophy that we have that, well, kids should just know how to behave. They know how to behave. So I'm not going to reward them for what they should already know. But the reality is they don't. And so it's kind of a stretch, but do you just know how to ride a bike, or did you have to learn? Did you just know how to swim, or did you have to learn? And so, and we got a lot of adults out there that don't know how to swim. So this is the same thing, is that these kids have to be taught how what we may have thought was very simple and what they should know, but they need to be taught that behavior.
Yeah. And what we know then too, is that they're still not engaging in the expected behavior, and we've done this, we do have a response to those behaviors. So again, we that kind of looping kind of gray box up in the upper right corner, that is our continuum of responses that we train officers in. So part of our PBIS program and really our implementation in the facility is that we train all staff, volunteers, educational staff, new officers in PBIS. And one of the things we train them on is ways to respond when we call them behavioral errors occur. So again, continuing to think of it, as Marguerite said, as a skill versus making it about the youth, making it like they wanted to do this or they are manipulating. Believe me, we still use that language because, it's something that we've been kind of using for a very long time. And so we're trying to train ourselves of thinking about behavior as behavior and as a skill deficit. And so we want to respond to them and reteach the skill or utilize some type of strategy, conferencing with the youth, having a conversation with them to figure out what's going on so that we can support them. So again, we want to be as proactive as possible by teaching them the skills, by reinforcing the skills. But when they're making that error, we do want to correct it quickly and make sure that we're providing them the level of support. If that is not enough, we collect a lot of data. So we collect reflection times, which is one of our lower level consequences, which is just that time to reflect and do an activity to figure out what was happening and why they were engaging in kind of those behaviors in the first place, and hopefully correct it in the future. If that doesn't work, then we have our incident reports, both non-confinement and confinement. And so those are ways that we look at tracking data around, does that youth need more support? And that's our indicator. If a youth does need more support, then our tier 2 and tier 3 team, they're meeting weekly. And so then they would provide additional interventions, additional support to that youth, and then monitor that as they move forward. So that last kind of bottom right piece is really, if a youth is not responding to the support we provide for all youth, then we want to intensify it and provide them more. So again, instead of just letting them flounder and watching them and saying, oh yeah, that's just who they are, we want to look at, do we need to provide more mental health support? Do we need to provide additional check-ins? Do we need to have an officer that has really good rapport with them, check in with them? Is it medical that needs to check in with them? Is it educational staff that needs to check in with them? And how do we build more skills? How do we give them more structure and predictability? How do we give them more reinforcement to help encourage those skills that maybe are really hard for them because they've never been taught those skills? Maybe it's hard for them because it goes against what they were taught, is how they should actually behave. And we're not saying that we're changing cultures or values, but what we're really trying to do is provide them the keys to success so that when they leave our facility, they have more skills than they came in with. Or when they go to a job, that they'll be able to maintain that job. Or when they go to college, they'll be able to have positive interactions on that college campus, or when we have an instructor from college come into our facility, that they can engage appropriately. So again, these are all really proactive strategies. And if we have to go on that reactive end, we still are providing a lot of support at that tier 2 and tier 3 level.
And there's always the question, what about safety and security? Because that's what our foundation is, right? We have to be safe. We have to have a secure facility. We are never going to compromise safety and security, and this will actually help with safety and security because it creates that consistency. It helps staff learn how to communicate with youth in a different manner and really build that positive rapport. And when a use and critical incident happens, then you deal with that the way you deal with it. And then you go to the other tools that are on your belt, whoever it is, any kind of training you might have received, that's when you're going to go to that. But I just want to be clear because I think sometimes there's concern about safety because we're being, focusing too much on a positive. But I will tell you, this has, and we'll kind of share in the end, this has made our facility much safer. It's safer physically and emotionally and mentally.
Yeah. We actually just had a youth share the other day just about how safe they feel in our facility and some experiences they've had in other locations in their lives, and how they don't feel like they have to look behind their back, that they feel really safe in the facility. So that was obviously great feedback for us to hear from a youth because we feel like our data shows that. But again, youth perspective is very, very important. Staff perspective is very, very important because our numbers can say one thing and people are saying a completely different thing. So again, we want to make sure we're keeping that at the forefront.
So a little bit about our journey. In 2016, when I was promoted in this position, my chief at the time, Chief Salio, basically turned to me and said, "You need to change the culture." And so we were a culture that had a lot of high uses of force, high use of pepper spray, a lot of us versus them. With staff and management and supervisors, and there was a lack of collaboration with our partners. So it was like, mental health, you guys stay in your office until we talk to you, and everybody was just kind of in their little silos. So we had a journey to embark upon, and I will tell you that the reality is that we definitely learned as we went, and it had some very unintended positive outcomes that I had no idea that would have happened. So we took some strategies for implementation, and really, you have to have a clear implementation plan of what you're going to do. And that doesn't mean that, and it's taken us 8.5 years to get to where we are. You have to have that collaboration. And when I mean that, the collaboration comes from every person that's in your building, because any person in your building that touches kids needs to be on the same page, and they need to be engaged and understand. And we'll talk more about that, but they need to be fully on board. You got to collect data. You got to monitor it. You got to monitor the fidelity, and you have to have clear leadership from the top. The best thing that happened was at the very first training, the chief was at the meeting, the assistant chief was at the meeting, chief deputy from the juvenile division. So all the top leaders from all the partners were there. Even the other night, when at our staff meeting, because we were doing kind of a brush up of PBIS, our chief and our assistant chief was at the meeting. So go ahead.
Okay, so we want to make sure that we have a clear implementation plan. So again, have a vision and use a framework. Now, it doesn't have to be PBIS. That is our journey. That's what we have found to be successful in our facility. Again, you're going to hear from San Francisco later talking about what their vision is, what their framework, what their practices are. So again, just utilizing something and having a clear direction. And so we want to make sure that we have a clear vision. And Marguerite's going to kind of talk about what brought upon our new vision and where we want it to go.
So we all know, and it's just part of our facilities now, but we were dealing with room confinement then, on how to basically, room confinement was not going to be allowed anymore. And we pulled some data the other day. We've had 10 room confinements since July 1. That's it. And so, and I think two of them have gone over 4 hours. So, and since January, well, I don't want to give away the goods by the end, but so we had to respond. And now look what's happened now since, since 2020 with the closing of DJJ and SB 823, and now requiring, youth to go to college and all these other things that we are required to do. So we have to respond. You have to improve the culture of your facility. And by improving the culture of your facility between staff members, and I will tell you that staff they're responsible for their culture as well. It can't always just be on management. They're responsible, but that will then just filter down to the youth. And then by that, it'll improve the relationships between youth and staff.
So again, we talked about our vision drove us to, and kind of the things that are really impacting the change that we knew needed to come. We chose to go down the route with PBIS. So part of that was because back when they brought this on, the community school and the county office was already kind of embarking on this journey in some of our programs. And so it also aligned with what Marguerite's vision and what she was tasked with as far as changing culture. It really aligned with moving that work forward. And so one of the things that, again, we want to be clear about is that there are tools out there. So if you want a PBIS program, again, we can't give you a nice, pretty box, unfortunately. I wish we could, but we can't. So there's a lot of tools out there. I'm going to have a QR code at the very end on our contact information that links to a Google Drive that has some of the things that we talk about today. It also has this and a couple other kind of resources from PBIS linked in there as well. So if you're like, I really want more information about this, there's some resources in there about what it actually looks like to do implementation. But again, we took what we were already doing and incorporated that into and then with our data, figured out what else did we need to add in. So again, utilizing a framework and making sure that we're doing things to fidelity and using evidence-based practices, which again, we're all tasked to do, both in the probation department and in the educational department. So being mindful, I mean, as Marguerite kind of teed us up for earlier, we've been doing this for 8 years and we still have a long way to go. It took us a very long time up until maybe a month and a half ago or 2 months ago to actually get our tier 2, tier 3 team meeting on a weekly basis and really utilizing it in the structure and in the evidence-based way. We are responding to youth. We are providing youth additional supports. We are even providing them some of the evidence-based practices that are recommended in tier 2, but we weren't doing it systematically. So we, again, are still on a very long, slow journey just to make sure we get it right. So this is implementation science. So again, if you're thinking about starting something new, or maybe you're in this journey, just kind of reminding yourself that it's a 3 to 5 year process to implement something new and to implement something new to fidelity. So this is just a really nice model. I always go back to this. Again, I coach a lot of schools. I work with our alternate programs. I work with our juvenile justice programs. And so like thinking about that first year is really exploration and adoption. Then we install something new. We're starting that initial implementation. So we need a lot of support. Then we finally get to full implementation when we're doing something to fidelity. We've got it. We're rocking and rolling. That feels really good. And we start to see some positive outcomes. But then we get to that innovation and sustainability piece. And really that's where we're at with tier 1 is that innovation and sustainability. I would definitely say we're in initial implementation right now with tier 2 and tier 3 interventions. And so again, wherever you're at, even within a framework of PBIS, we've been doing it for 8 years, but because there's different elements of it, we're in different stages based on kind of implementation science. And we really see this, yes, this is researched and yes, this is from what they say, but I've lived this with a lot of my schools. I've lived this now joining probation 6 years ago, and this really rings true. So I think it's also, we want things done quickly, especially when things aren't good, right? When we want that change, when we want to see some positive impact for our youth, for our staff, we want it quick, but there's no quick fix, right? You have to go slow to go fast. So thinking about this, and again, we use that continuous improvement mindset. So, doing the plan, do, study, act cycle. So always continuously improving as we go through all of those stages of implementation. So I know that's very jargony, but I think it's important when we're thinking about and listening to both ourselves and San Francisco to think about where we're at on this implementation timeline, as well as if you're implementing something. I think it's a really nice way for us to give ourselves grace and really know that change takes time and implementation takes time. So again, this ties back into having that clear framework and having that clear plan for implementation.
So on this partner collaboration, and just also a little touching back on the stage that we do, is that, we have adopted, we started with the posters, and it took us till about 2022 before we got the electronic scans going. And then just my replacement in the interview process for the person who's going to actually replace me, PBIS was a huge part of our interview and the test part of it. And so that's how embedded it is. And so, and now it's in our FTO program. Every single person that comes into the facility and actually is a working partner here is trained in it. All our volunteers are trained in it. So it is embedded. So now it is enculturated into the facility. And so most of the staff now, that's all they know. And so it's so easy to make culture bad. It takes years to make culture good. So just keep that, just remember that. And the thing is with partners, I have a little phrase, and sometimes, it's catchy, but everybody's got their lane. And so I always say, know your lane, get your lane, stay in your lane. Sometimes they bleed a little bit, probation is the highway. So juvenile hall, your juvenile justice facility, you are the highway. And you have all these different lanes on that highway and all your different partners that we're all going in the same direction. We all have the same purpose, and it's to serve the youth that we have here, right? Because if we didn't have kids, we wouldn't have it. So I call the core 4. We have a significant amount of partners, but the core 4, meaning that is probation, county office of education, our behavioral health, and our public health. I know there's more than 4 people, but this is a picture of us that we presented in Chicago this past October. Where we actually presented on collaboration and how we've worked together. So
this is the old way that we used to do it. So Marguerite I love the road thing. Like when she told me that, I was like, that makes sense, right? Because we do all have our lanes. Yet before we were super siloed, right? She talked about mental health, stay in your office, we'll call you when we need you. So what we really had to do, and one of the things that PBIS is all about, is really bringing all the voices to the table. So we've really shifted our model from like these silos to now we're all in the same barn, right? Probation is at the top of the barn. They are going to, obviously they have the regulations. We all have our own regulations, but again, we're all working together because we all live in the same house, right? And we're all operating and we all have those same values. So again, the partner collaboration just ties back into that vision, into that framework, and having a clear plan.
Money. So this is an interesting thing. I heard one place that that PBIS takes a lot of money. It doesn't take a lot of money to be positive. Positivity, I think, is pretty much free. You get to choose how much you want to spend on this, meaning your commissary, your rewards, how you're going to do if you're going to do it electronic, how are you? Yeah, you're going to do training. This is not, those are kind of some other things, but there's a lot of shared and braided funding that we do with county office, and it's all, and they have to, county office, not that I'm going to blow up county offices, but they have some requirements that they need to do for our juvenile justice facilities. So I know if I need something, if they need something, we help each other out. For example, we're putting a trailer pad on one of our yards to have career technical education. We're paying for the trailer pad. They're bringing in the trailer and paying for the trailer. So there's just that kind of collaboration, because we look at, again, what is our underlying common goal, and that's to do good stuff for kids.
Yeah, so there's a lot. Again, if you have questions at the end, we'll have time for questions, or you can reach out to us if you have questions about that. I am not the budget person, but I know who the budget people are. So I know them very well because I ask them for things. So let us know if you have questions about what that looks like as far as the collaboration between county office and probation. So I'm a behavior analyst. So I love data and I love monitoring it. I think I'm turning probation. I mean, they definitely collect their own data, but maybe the boots on the ground people don't love it as much as I do. But again, we're using that continuous improvement approach. So this is the data that Marguerite was speaking to earlier. So I will let her share this and speak on this.
It speaks for itself. 2016, 15 uses of pepper spray, 48 uses of force, went up a little bit in 17. Now here we are in 2024. So far, we have 12 uses of force. We haven't used pepper spray since the beginning of 23. We haven't used the wrap since 2019. And then even mechanical restraints were less than 10 for this year. So these all speak for themselves.
Yeah, so here's this just represented visually for you all. So the X's are average daily pops. So I know some of you may have seen this in the past, but obviously our average daily pop has gone down over time, but it's been steady the last, two-ish, three-ish years. And so we're still seeing those numbers decrease. So again, that's really positive for us. And again, since implementation, we've really seen a decrease in those data points.
We just got about 5 minutes here.
Okay, great. We're moving on. So we also look at facility data. So we talked about IRs and RTs before. So this is that data that we look at. And again, we really utilize that to action plan. So here's what we do in our monthly meetings. We look at the data and we action plan. So this is the one I talked about earlier around looking at youth incentives and how they saw themselves being recognized for expected behaviors. So we action planned and again, saw some positive results from that action planning. Fidelity data is really important to make sure. We can say we do PBIS all day long, but we want to make sure that we're actually seeing that we are doing it to fidelity. So there is a facility-wide TFI or tiered fidelity inventory. So that is again linked in that Google Drive. As you can see over time, tier 1 has been pretty strong in fidelity, but in tier 2, tier 3, we've wavered. So again, we're very new in the implementation and we're okay with that. We're learning and we're improving as we go. So that's all we can really ask for as far as fidelity. So again, that's another data point we look at.
I will talk about this. So it's clear leadership from the top down. We have to, as leaders, I had to have that chief at the table, and the assistant chief, who is now our chief, who now admits, he's like, Marguerite, I didn't think you could do it. and he goes, but I'm a believer now. So it is just incredibly important to have that leadership at the top. So again, that's why I see chiefs on this call and I'm like, that's where it's got to start, because it is now a culture, because a lot of our JSOs or juvenile service officers are being promoted to probation officers, and is now starting to infiltrate into the department, having that attitude. So it's really changed. It's starting to change and have an impact on the whole department. again, it's about the culture. It's, you know, in our staff meeting the other night, and I'm realizing, you know, just the energy I felt in the room. Because a lot of times you have staff meetings and there's like this little contentious, like, you know, vibe that's going on. The energy is like, oh no, what are we going to talk about? It's going to be, there's going to be conflict. And there was so much, like, it just felt good. And so we allow our staff actually do shout outs to one another. And it happened really organically at a staff meeting 8 years ago, where I just did a shout out to someone like, hey, I just want to acknowledge so-and-so, da, 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 da. And then it happened and they just started popcorning all around the room organically, that the staff did that. So we caught on to that and we started doing, we made actually shout out forms. So now they continue to do that. So again, it's embedded and embedded throughout our entire facility and everything we do. So it's in our policy and procedures, it's in our handbook. Our board of supervisors note about it. Our juvenile justice commission does. Our we had our what are they called? The you know, all the different inspections that come in are totally aware of what we're doing and are in support of it. The grand jury has come through. I was even subpoenaed one time to talk about PBIS. So
yeah, so again, it is just the way we do it now. It would be weird to have our facility without it. Again, we still have a lot of work to do, but again, leadership is really important. And Marguerite does not know this because I've hid this slide from her, but it does take a strong leader. So I'm getting all choked up, but we're so grateful for Marguerite. As many of you know, this is her last Friday. She, you know, she has her beautiful background on, but she's got boxes behind her. So I tried to take my best Marguerite-isms and put them up on the screen here. So that's Ruthie. If you've been to our facility, you've probably met Ruthie. She's in our campsite. She is our little friendly doggy. But again, you know, really this work would not be where it's at if it wasn't for Marguerite and her dedication, her passion, and all her Marguerite-isms. I probably got a couple of them wrong, but you know, she is hilarious. She's got her always, she's updating them daily. But again, a strong leader is really, really important to move this work forward. So yes, shared leadership is really important, but also it's really important to have that leader with that vision and continuing to move it forward. So Marguerite, we're thankful for all the things that you've done and the impact that you've had on our facility. And so we're going to kind of talk and now shift gears a little bit and turn it over to San Francisco. But Marguerite, I don't know if you've had anything else to add before I turn it over to San Francisco.
Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure. I've been told that I'm probably not done working, but I'm going to take about 6-8 months. And but PBIS is definitely a passion of mine, and it's so important that this is the one thing that I would come back to and help other facilities bring it into their department. So, and all the people that I know, you guys keep doing the work. It's worth it.
So we talked a lot about PBIS and as a framework and the evidence-based pieces that we see and the things that we've seen work really well in our facility. And so we wanted to show kind of the things that we talked about today, the things that we have, some of the things we didn't explicitly call out, but they're there. And so San Francisco is going to talk about their RISE program, which really fits into that PBIS framework as an evidence-based practice. So if you were doing another program, sometimes those things fit in. So I'm going to turn it over to Chief Miller to start us off talking about San Francisco.
Thanks, Lindsay. Can folks hear me? Are we good?
Yes.
Okay, great. So hi, everybody. It's great to be here today with the amazing folks from SLO. So like Rosie said, I am Chief Katie Miller, San Francisco Juvenile Probation. For folks who don't know, San Francisco has 2 probation departments, adult and juvenile, so 2 chiefs. And I have been with the department for almost 5 years. And I'm really pleased to be here with Shane Thomas, our Director of Facilities, who's been here for almost 2 years, which is kind of crazy. So we are really happy to be here today. We're going to talk about the new behavior development model that we are creating and implementing in our Juvenile Justice Center here in San Francisco. Just trying to get my stuff where your stuff should be. Okay, cool. So I'm just going to speak briefly to connect the 2 sections of what you're hearing today. So I want to thank Lindsay for us collaborating on this slide. So, you know, like you heard, PBIS is a framework. You heard it referred to as a coat rack also, right? That you can put different kinds of interventions in. So it provides support for all the youth in the facility and recognizes that some or a few of them require more intensive interventions and support. It's evidence-based and it's based on a medical model. RISE, which you're going to hear from us about, is a program. So it's actually something you can hang into a framework. It incorporates evidence-based models, but it's not itself evidence-based. We are, to Marguerite's point, building this plane in the air right now. And it's based on a program that was created for street outreach and engagement of the highest risk youth and young adults. So distinctions, but also I just feel like this pairs really nicely today. So next slide, please, Lindsay. So a little bit about why we decided to take on this project in San Francisco and who we serve in our facility. So our facility, which we call the Juvenile Justice Center, it currently uses a merit point system. It's been around for a while. It was internally created. I would say, and I think Shane and I have talked about this a lot, we both feel like it really lacks nuance. It's very reactive in its orientation to when the kids do things. And it's inconsistently applied. It doesn't have kind of inherent oversight across our different units. And so, that's really important because one thing we've heard from young people is that they experience that inconsistency. So we had an outside research partner interview all of our young people in both our detention and our long-term commitment units in the spring of 2023. And like the most common things kids talked about was that they felt like there was just inconsistency and favoritism in how we used our current model. And I would say that that is true. And I would also say that, teenagers are naturally and developmentally primed to be looking for kind of the cracks and looking and centering unfairness in their experience, right? So it's like we need to be even better than like fair, right? We need to be like overly transparently fair in our structures and support for them. So we wanted also a model that incorporated restorative components. That's really important to me. It's really important to Shane. And we think that it's a really important part of positive adolescent development. And we've created a climate that we really want on all of our units. And then we also knew we needed a new tool to accommodate shifts in the facility. So with the closure of DJJ, we operate an SYTF now in 2 of our units. So long-term youth, young adults, these are really big changes for San Francisco. And this slide, this is from June, but it's pretty representative for us. It kind of shows you who's in the facility by case status, by age. So right now, today, we actually have 12 young people committed in our facility. I think it's a lot more than anybody would have ever expected for San Francisco. And then our detention population varies widely. It can go anywhere from about a dozen kids up to kind of the high 20s on any given day. And today, for example, I think we have 32 young people here across both populations. And then our age range is really varied, right? Like so many other places. So today, I think we have young people between the ages of 14 and 22 here. There's been months where half the facility is 18 and up, right, in the last few years. So we really knew that we needed 2 big things. Fundamental tools and skills for daily interactions and interventions, and really a new structure for managing behavior of kids and young adults. So next slide, please, Lindsay. So to meet these needs, Juvenile Probation partnered with ROCA. ROCA is a nonprofit that originated in Massachusetts and now also provides its operations in Baltimore and Connecticut. Some of you who are listening today may have already been exposed to ROCA. There was a webinar about their rewire model in the spring. And I've had the privilege of being familiar with ROCA for a long time, about a decade, beginning when I was a DA here in the San Francisco District Attorney's Office. ROCA was their model, and I'll talk about it a little bit here. It was a very specific inspiration for San Francisco in the creation of our young adult court in our adult system. And it really ties in so well to what we're trying to do here. So we're going to share the next few slides. You'll see generously provided by ROCA that summarizes kind of what their work is and then why it's so fundamental to the behavior development model that we're creating and implementing in San Francisco. So ROCA, as a nonprofit, does 4 different things. It does relentless community level outreach, like street outreach, for the highest risk young people in the communities it serves, the kids who aren't going to come into the program, the kids engaged in serious violence, and the young adults as well. always keeping safety at the forefront, but really focusing on that effective engagement. It has also developed Rewire CBT, which is a cognitive-based theory program that they developed. We'll talk about it in a minute. And it was evaluated by the Massachusetts General Hospital and found to be an effective practice. So we look at it as an EBP for our work. Third, they've created a variety of programs and spaces where kids can practice these skills. So they do street outreach, but also their facilities have vocational opportunities, group opportunities, all these places where they're using that Rewire model on the daily across all aspects of their operations. And then finally, and importantly for us, through their institute, ROCA engages institutions and systems to help us improve what we do, from police to whole probation departments. The entire probation apparatus in the state of Maryland, for example, has been trained in this approach. And I really appreciate that. They just want all of us collectively to be able to do this work as effectively as we can. Next slide, please, Lindsay. And so in the last 20 years, their focus has really been on how to leverage what we are learning and knowing about brain science in the pursuit of the changes we want to see in young people. And so, you know, we've learned a lot, right? And I think that people have had the opportunity to go to all kinds of trainings about the effects of trauma, about the effects of healthy and not healthy development on brains. And what's important is that ROCA really leverages the science in the creation of this Rewire model. It is designed for people who may not be ready for change, and understanding why we're not, and then really using that understanding and all of that research toward the fidelity and effectiveness of the model that they've created. So next slide, please. So Rewire CBT, which is really their kind of core model, is designed to take what we know about adolescent brain science, adolescent development, neuroplasticity of our brains, and CBT, and put it all together and then put that in the hands of the staff who have the most contact with our young people. It really leverages opportunities to kind of rewire brains, right? Hence the name of the model, because we know that we're able to kind of disrupt what we think, what we do, what we feel, challenge those assumptions, do things different ways, and then practice those different ways until they become our norm. And so the way that they do it is very kind of, I feel, very simple and elegant as a model. So next slide, please, Lindsay. So literally the way the ROCA's training focuses on using a handful of skills, you can see these black and white boxes here, that we practice with young people in all aspects of our interactions with them to help them have that kind of positive development that we want to see. So it focuses on building emotional regulation, behavior activation, and cognitive flexibility, how we feel, what we do, what we think. And it does it by teaching these 7 core skills and then relentlessly working with young people to practice those skills. So you can see all the skills on the slide, and you can see that they're in language that really resonates with young people and with adults. Like, this makes sense to me when I see it. And, you know, I think what you heard from the SLO folks is like language matters. The words we use with kids matters. And what I love about this is that I think that these words really work. And then I think the consistency of all of us using the words with the young people helps them also kind of really reinforce. Last slide for me, please. And so, like I said, it's these 7 core skills that you saw on the preceding slide. It is not something like going to thinking for a change, right? So the idea is that you can use these skills with young people in all aspects of daily operations, that they can be done on a street corner, right? If you're ROCA in their community, that can be done for us in a facility. I really think of our counselors as our frontline workers, right? So they can use those skills. They can be done together in a group session. It can be one-on-one. It can be in a really hard moment for a kid. There's just all different ways that you can bring tying back kids' think, feel, do cycles to these skills, right? In hard moments, let's act on your values. What do you want to get out of that court hearing today that I know you're really stressed about, right? How are we going to talk about that before you go and after? Those kinds of opportunities. And I think what's important is that it really was created for kids who aren't ready, willing, and able, right? So in the community, it was for kids who aren't going to come into a place on their own, aren't going to stick it out with a job. And for us, like, we know our kids did not choose to be here. So they're here, but not because they came into a place ready to change. And so I think that's why it's a really good fit for us. So starting in 2023, San Francisco Juvenile started working with ROCA to train all of our sworn staff and some of our key partners in Rewire. We worked with ROCA to provide training for frontline staff, coaching for our mid-level supervisors, and then ongoing coaching and support for everyone, because as you've heard a lot from SLO, right, fidelity is really important. Doing the thing the way you learned it matters. So to date in San Francisco, we've had 85 sworn staff trained, as well as 17 other partners. So with this foundation of ROCA Rewire, we then worked with ROCA's team to develop our new behavioral development model, which builds on this and incorporates it. And that is called RISE. And I will hand it over to Shane to walk you all through what that is.
Hello, Shane Thomas here. Good afternoon, good rainy afternoon to everyone. At least it is here in the city. So I am going to walk you through the RISE model. So RISE is our positive behavior development program. And RISE stands for restoration, improvement, success, and elevation. And RISE is basically grounded in the Rewire CBT best practices that Chief just outlined. The RISE behavior management system is designed to maintain a safe and secure environment for young people, the staff, community, while facilitating operational strategies aimed at creating a therapeutic culture that supports positive behavior change. Basically, it's our new merit system, but it has these distinct goals of the behavior management system are to create a safe environment for the young people and the staff. We hope to reduce behavioral incidents, promote healthy and positive behavior, develop a system of fairness and equitably issued consequences, complements the treatments that we have here for young people and the programming that we have, and issue accountability, but offering skill building in its responses. It's basically a point and level system that promotes and incentivizes positive behavior and contains clear strategies to address negative behaviors through a trauma-informed skill building repair process. Basically, when a young person has an issue or behavior problem, this is how we'll respond to it. It's designed to be a guided level system and a tool for both the youth and the staff. Next slide, please. So this is the model. When we first were trying to think this through, we gave a lot of thought about where young people should start. In most programming, and as we were thinking it through, we thought, should they start at the baseline with the bare minimum, only what they can receive through the Bill of Rights that they're obligated to have, or should we start them at a little bit higher, higher than the state requirements? And we believe that it was better to start the young people with a little bit more than what's required. And that way we can further incentivize them, and maybe they'll want to maintain what they have while striving to earn more. So the current design, the young people who enter the facility will start at the community member. And as you see, the bottom level is the lowest level, and community member is where young people will enter. The RISE is a point and level system that promotes and incentivizes positive behavior, and it contains clear strategies to address negative behaviors through a trauma-informed skill building repair process. For our pilot, which we will be rolling out soon in the new year, it will start with the SYTF committed units. Youth in the committed units that have been with us for a while already have earned certain statuses and privileges. So we thought that it might be difficult to start them back at the community member. So young people who are currently with us will start at the model resident in the middle area. But young people who enter the facility, once this is launched, they'll start at the community member. As youth earn points and they maintain their points through a certain number of weeks, they'll move up a level. The youth will move down if they don't maintain their points, resulting in a loss of privileges. And young people can go to reset at any level. So you can drop down to reset whether you're at community member, a model resident, or a peer leader. And if there's a serious incident, the youth will be placed on reset until there's accountability responses have been completed. The key difference between reset and our current model is between RISE and our current model is that young people have to earn their way off of reset. Once you're committed, one thing we kept hearing from our staff was that there's a lack of accountability. They kept saying there's no consequences, and young people were being placed on frozen. They were being placed on frozen for maybe perhaps 2 weeks, and then after that time, it might expire. But there really wasn't much accountability or work to be done. It just expired. In this current model, we're using the rewire and the CBT skills, and young people have to earn their way off by being accountable, by completing certain skill sets to move off, and making sure that they've been stabilized and that their repair has been completed before they can get off of reset. Next slide, please. So this is the same model, but just another way of looking at it. This illustrates how young people will move through the levels. We developed a point sheet that offers clear instruction that assigns point, and it's a guide for staff where they can help to follow the process for young people. So young people will earn points daily in these different domains. Respective people, following directions and facility rules, whether they engage in programming, which includes school, whether they exhibit good hygiene and adhere to the dress codes, if they're a good community member, if they're caring, helpful, and considerate. The points would be calculated daily. The youth are required to earn a certain level of points over time to move up a level. And also, failing to maintain those points, the young people will move down a level. If it's a serious incident that occurs, the young person will be placed on reset. Reset is used after a serious incident, and safety of the young people and the community members is always taken into account while we build repair and stabilization. But if a youth is on reset, the privileges are at the lowest level.
Was a second TV and TV.
You might want to mute. But even at reset, young people still receive all of their rights based on the Youth Bill of Rights. Youth receive points daily throughout each shift, and they're calculated and reviewed on a daily basis. Next slide, please. It was important for us to develop a model with skill building components, including rewire. The core elements of this model are accountability, skill building, and repair. So how do we provide this level of oversight? How are we making sure that there's some fidelity in this model? We developed what's called a RISE team. And the RISE team is an oversight system framework, and they review behavior incidents. They apply the repair and skill building responses. And this team is comprised of the facility director, assistant director, frontline staff. We have credible messengers that are embedded in our programming here throughout the day, and then support staff and administrators. And they meet daily, except for on weekends and holidays. The impacted young person and the staff are also invited to participate in the behavior reviews, and they're invited, but they're not required. And decisions may be reviewed by executive staff if there's an appeal. The purpose of this RISE team are to review incidents and issue repairs and skill building responses, review resets to assure that they're assigned appropriately, and promote level ups. For young people, when they want to progress higher, they can come before this board and petition to move up a level. And then review specialized incentive requests. So later on, when we show you some of the incentives, those requests will come before this team as well. And then review point challenges or discrepancies if a young person feels like something is not, if some points weren't assigned appropriately. Young people who are engaged in behaviors that are considered an incident will be placed on reset and participate in additional interventions and support to address these behaviors. While they're on reset, they'll be issued repairs, some of those CBT rewire skill building tasks. And throughout the process, young people will be participating in harm reduction and restoring relationships. Incidents are ranked on severity. So the responses are crafted based on a level system of 1, 2, or 3. If an incident or infraction occurs, staff will take the necessary actions to make sure the community is safe. The involved staff will submit a RISE referral form for a type 1 infraction or above. An example would be if a young person uses profanity, if he drops like the F-bomb, that should be addressed through points. That's not something that would come to the RISE committee. But if a young person were verbally assaulted, would saying some really derogatory and threatening things, that would be a higher infraction, and that would be a referral to the RISE team. In the second example, if he's abusive towards a staff member, the staff should be de-escalating the young person and addressing them in real time. And once he's de-escalated, they should be assigning some rewired CBT worksheets, and then the referral is made to RISE. The RISE team will review the referral, hear about the incident, either from the involved staff or through documentation that's submitted. We've established an email where staff may not be on shift, but they can send an email to the RISE committee that we can review at the committee. And then the outcomes that will be assigned to the young person might be some kind of repair or skill building, but there'll be a menu of options, but it also is a spectrum. So there might be a number of repairs applied, or it might be something simple as you've completed the CBT worksheet, so now you need to write an apology letter. Some examples of repair are like an apology letter or maybe even an act of service. Suggestions for the repair can come from the harmed individual. So when they write a response to the committee, they might make a recommendation about how this young person can repair harm, or it can even come from the young person themselves or the RISE committee. It's important to note that RISE does not take the place of safety and security protocols, and that's something that we had to stress with our staff, that this is a response like to the like a merit system, a response to the behavior after safety and security has been addressed. This is really designed to promote behavior change. Next slide, please. So here we'll review an incident. As noted, minor incidents do not go to the RISE team. Those will be addressed through points, and the young person's access to privileges will determine how they're, based on their points, those things will be addressed. But if an incident occurs, staff will first take the actions to make the community safe, de-escalate the issue, and then maybe pause. No one should be making decisions or issuing consequences when they're in a heightened state. So during this pause is an opportunity for a reflection of both the staff and the youth. It's a time of investigation. It's a time of getting details and doing appropriate responses and getting into a mental space to start addressing the incident. So I'll walk you through an example. If we have an incident where we have to stop inactivity, let's just take, for example, a young person, is movie night, and a young person has a violent outburst and he's yelling at everyone. You have to stop the activity and put all the young people up. That referral would go to the RISE committee. And an example of a harm, we might review it, no one was injured, but that young person might decide that as part of their repair and doing their CBT rewire sheets that were assigned to them, that they disrupted a movie night that had an effect on the entire community. And so perhaps they may donate some of their points to provide popcorn for the unit as an apology for that. Or maybe they'll write a note, or maybe they'll do an act of service and do the cleanup or laundry task, but something to repair the harm that has occurred. Okay. Next slide. So here's our incentive sheet. This is still a work in progress, but youth who are committed to the facility are the only ones who will have access to the higher levels. So those detention youth will never progress beyond the model citizen. So when you see here some of the incentives, those are above model citizen, those are for the SYTF or committed youth. Built into this process, you have the opportunity to earn unique experiences. And the goal is to have young people in the long-term units have the opportunity for enhanced program and enhanced experiences. We're still vetting this with our staff, and we envision ultimately like having opportunities for furloughs and for the young people to have a wide range of incentives. It is our belief that the more you can incentivize things and have some people, young people having opportunities to earn things, the less behaviors we'll have to address. So when young people are with us for years, they'll have the opportunity to build trust and move up to levels that will allow them to engage in enhanced programming and activities. For example, vocational programming, where they will participate in like barber classes or construction or culinary. Those trainings require equipment and supplies where there's a level of trust that has to be earned. And as young people progress to these higher levels, we envision tailoring these enhancements and these programs for young people's around their interests, and even some specialized things such as music lessons or driver's education courses or photography classes, or even personalized care packages, which could be massages or a specialized hair treatment. Next slide.
All right,
And Chief,
back
this
to
is back
me.
to you.
So one thing that we didn't talk about, and I'm reminded that we should say, is that like our judge is very interested in how this is going to inform progress hearings for the committed youth, right? So right now the court, I think, has long wanted in San Francisco to have young people's behavior in the facility be more kind of reliably reported for all kids, but especially for the long-term young people. The ability for the judge to also not only know the language of rewire, but then understand the levels that the kids are at, whether they've had incidents, all of those things are really important to him. He's really talked a lot about how he thinks that our 6-month reviews for secure track kids should function in a sense like parole hearings did. He wants young people to be able to come and make their case to him for why they should have different reductions in their baseline terms. And so it equips the kids with a way to present and structure their presentations, and then it equips us with a way also to be talking about how they're doing. So I wanted to add that in. In terms of model development, so we started doing this, working on this in 2023. I'm so heartened every time I hear the SLO folks talk about like stages of implementation and how long things should take, because it really takes longer than you think it will. Swear to God. So we started in summer 2023, and we, with the ROCA folks, looked at current behavior management models across a range of institutions across the country, actually, picking and choosing from kind of pieces that we liked of those, and really looking, like Shane said, to places that had any kind of restorative component built into their models, and models that we could consistently infuse rewire into. And then, so that took about a year to really kind of flesh out all the things Shane's talking about. So for example, there are worksheets that give staff all kinds of prompts and how many points you can give to different kinds of behaviors, because we do really want to promote consistency. And then this summer, last spring into the summer, we began kind of pushing forward into implementation. It's not on this slide, but I want to note that even beginning last spring, we met with our labor partners. So for the 2 different unions that represent our hall staff, wanted to make sure we met with their representatives, let them know what was going to be coming. So they also could be a good source for their members if their members reached out to them with concerns. But then really started working with our secure track units to prep. So to talk about RISE, and then to really, through weekly meetings that Shane's been having, and now bi-weekly with those 2 units, the units that have our long-term kids, to be really working on what are all the policies and procedures and practices of those units that need to be very, very tight before we can layer this on. So really strengthening the foundation before kind of building the RISE house on top of it. We had hoped that we could do that for a few months and then really head into full launch of RISE this fall. And we realized it just takes more time and incrementalism. So they've been having those meetings since the summer to work on kind of the daily, just really having effective practices on the daily. And then this fall, we started the next 2 pieces of what we thought were necessary. One of them is called Skill of the Week. So we're now on our 2nd round of every 8 weeks, going through Skill of the Week with all sworn staff, probation, and hall staff, where every week the whole department focuses on one of those skills that you saw on that slide. And everyone's really encouraged and incentivized to be using that skill in their interactions with young people that week, and then be providing the kind of written documentation of that back to us to be looking at who's using it, who's trying it out, who's practicing, who isn't. And then for the people trying it, like, are they doing it right? And if they're not, what do we need to do in terms of circling back and training and ongoing TA? so that this whole fall is really about people getting comfortable with practicing the very things that we're going to want kids to be practicing. Additionally, we have now started what we're calling the Rise Rev Up. So, and that is, like Shane said, a team that meets every morning in the facility using our current behavior model, going through all the incidents. How did it work? What do we want to do with the responses that we had to the incidents? And what kind of gaps has this revealed to us that we also need to be shoring up before Rise hits? So that has started. That now takes every morning. It means every morning I'm like trying to figure out when I can tap Shane for other things. But we really know that we need it. And we need to get into the habit of all knowing that that's going to be a thing that happens every day here. And that key staff every morning will be coming together to do those things. And what I really like is that we're already really seeing that muscle start to develop between that leadership and other staff, knowing that every morning that's going to happen, so that when we switch over from them using our current behavior system into Rise, the teamwork and the routines already established. So I think that's been really great. And I want to shout out to Shane for really acknowledging that we needed Rise Rev Up before Rise. And then, you know, as we move into the next year, the other things that I want to acknowledge are that, like, there's things that you don't even, that you know you're going to need to do, but you need to invest staff time in. So all the documentation for this is going to be in our case management system. Our facility and our staff are used to really operating from a paper perspective. And so we're simultaneously shifting folks into using electronic records for this while also learning something new. So a lot of times being spent in this month in particular, really helping all the staff become comfortable using that new format so that that's not a barrier. We want to really make sure that when the switch is just for Rise itself, that none of these other things become a barrier to successful implementation, because it'll be really hard to tell what's working and what isn't. Final slide. Thanks, Lindsay. So we started by talking about some of the differences between the models, but just wanted to end with some commonalities. And you can see them listed on the slide. I won't read them, but I do want to acknowledge that these are also very much evidence-based elements, right? So the things that our two models, our approaches and models share. And what I also really want to acknowledge is that when we, even preparing for this webinar or presentation earlier in the summer, like, what we learned about PBIS really helped us think about the right ways to implement Rise, right? So in PBIS is based on the premise that it'll work, many things will work for most young people, but some people need more. So we're going to be assessing Rise through that lens. You know, if things are working for most kids, but not just a few, it probably means we're on the right track with Rise, but some kids may need more. If it's not working for a lot of the kids, that should tell us something different. How we evaluate, incorporate youth voice will also be important to us. So just really want to thank the folks from SLO, because it's really helped us think about how to use PBIS approach, even as a tool for how we get this going in the coming months. So we are excited, and we'll report back over time. Thank you.
So thank you all for such a great presentation, so much great information, and I think honest perspective and feedback and observations from your implementation, and sharing, you know, the struggles and challenges and successes. Obviously, we need to talk about all of them, all of those things. So just really appreciate sharing your time this afternoon and putting the work into this presentation, and certainly all the work that went into, you know, the work to implement the programs that resulted in practices that resulted in today's presentation. So we will have a few minutes for questions. So if anyone does have a question, do feel free to raise your hand or drop them in the chat if you prefer to ask a question that way. I do have one question if we don't receive any, but I don't want to use the time first if there are others. So definitely want to defer to our attendees if anyone has any questions.
And Rosie, just really quickly, a technical piece.
Sure.
So Jennifer Gonzalez is Marguerite's replacement. So that's why her contact info is up there. If anybody has questions about the facility, she would be the go-to. And then that's that QR code. We're going to be sharing out the slides, but if you want to snap it now, that'll take you to a Google Drive with some resources.
Great, thank you. Well, there isn't any yet, so I'm going to go ahead and ask mine. And Chief Miller touched on one of those things. And so just curious for San Luis Obispo County, do you use or have you incorporated within PBIS elements to help inform your progress review hearings and the reports on how a youth is doing as far as positive behavior and so forth for the progress review hearings? Curious how that connection, if PBIS lends itself to that, and then certainly Chief Miller, if there's anything, I know you touched on this, so you may not have anything else to expand on, but if anything comes to mind and you want to jump in, please feel free, or Shane.
So in SLO, we do, so for our SOAR program, we have something kind of like the RISE. We have different levels there. And in order to get to the next level, youth have to demonstrate that they've learned some skills and they've gone to different, engaged in different therapeutic interventions. They're engaging in their education and their behavior is on target and doing well, just like those three things that are always talked about in the progress hearing. So PBIS really lends itself all the way, because we use that sort of framework when we're doing we actually do it monthly, where we review their individual rehabilitation plan. We treat it as that case plan. And so we review it as a group monthly. And so the people at that table are education, the therapists who are working with them, the probation officer who's working with them, a JSO, a juvenile service officers 3, and then usually the chief deputy or assistant chief deputy. So we look at that, PBIS is, it impacts everything, because it impacts how we even ask questions to kids when we're doing that interview process, because we're asking questions to talk about their growth. Because we call it path of flight. And then we have also peaks and valleys for our Coastal Valley Academy. And so you have to hit different peaks in order to continue on in the program. And it's using that kind of language. So we're always trying to really be strength-based in those conversations with kids. And then also look at what are some areas they need to grow in and having them help them identify them. So it's also using a lot of motivational interviewing in there as well. Hopefully that somewhat answered your question.
Yeah, no, that was great. Thank you. And again, we have a couple minutes if there are any questions that come to mind for either San Francisco or for San Luis Obispo. I certainly do appreciate all of the time that you have lent to us on more than one occasion now, because I should also add, for those of you who attended our statewide conference, this may sound familiar to you, and we did get one question, so the QR code looks a little cut off on the bottom.
Okay, I will
Is it
make sure
possible to
it's
show?
good when we share that out, and I will make sure that link is in there as well. So yeah, thank you.
No, actually, I'm gonna. Okay. Right, because we will be sending all of this out, so you will be able to have access to all of the information when we send it out to everyone post the webinar. So, all right. Well, oh, sorry.
Your browser away, you could actually see if you adjust your browser, you can see the QR code a little bit better. If you adjust your mouse, you can see the QR code better.
Yes, if you move it off the screen.
Yeah, anybody at home, for the viewers from home.
Those watching. Yes, if you have, especially if you're multiple screens, that is, I was noticing that too. So thank you for that. Well, with that then, Marguerite, I do think it's fitting that, this is one of the last things on your list to be doing right before your last day. So do thank you. Obviously your career has been amazing and your contributions, and thank you for sharing your time with us today and just everything that you do. And so wish you the best in your next adventures. I'm sure you'll be doing a few different things and having fun there, and for your time off. So, and to Lindsay, Chief Miller, Shane, thank you so much. Truly appreciate your time. And I'm sure you'll probably be getting some emails post today. So look forward to continuing this conversation, and thank you all, and wish you all a wonderful weekend. So thank you so much.
Thanks everybody.
Bye, Marguerite.
Thank you.